Hi, I'm Peter Roper. This is another serving of Potluck Politics. We're very fortunate to have Representative Aundré Bumgardner here today, who represents the 41st District, which now includes a good part of Stonington and a part of Groton. Thank you very much, Aundré, for joining us.
Yes, Peter, it's great to be with
Appreciate
you. Thank you for having me.
I hope we can talk to your constituents here a little bit. The last few years, Terri, my wife, who's our producer and director, has recorded many of your legislative updates, which you do with your fellow representatives, and those are very informative. This year, unfortunately, she hasn't been able to do that. So it was a longer session. I think lots got done, and the budget and a lot of things going on, so we thought it'd be good to have someone who was actually there come and tell us about at least what you saw happening and what you think got accomplished. So let us know what went on.
Absolutely. Well, again, it's a privilege to be with you, and it was a very eventful legislative session. We started in January and convened in January, and the session ended in about the first week of June. They call this year the long session in large part because this is also the year we tackle the biennium state budget. So both.
So the budget is every 2 years.
Yes.
So it makes it a longer session when you're actually tackling that one.
That's right. That's right. So it's a 2-year budget, a biennium budget, and each fiscal year, we can make adjustments to the budget, but by and large, the spending priorities are set in the 2-year budget. Which obviously was passed this year. This year was unique in that the multi-billion-dollar, $40+ billion budget was passed on a bipartisan basis, and you don't hear that all too often in politics. Certainly at the
even in Connecticut,
even in Connecticut, certainly at the national level, but not as much at the state level. Another fun fact is, anywhere between 90 and 95% of legislation that is passed up in Hartford is passed by a pretty overwhelming bipartisan consensus and majority. And there's a handful of issues here and there where we do disagree, but budgets are about priorities. They're about values, and this was a budget where we invested in higher education, invested in our workforce, in particular our healthcare and manufacturing workforce. We delivered the largest tax cut in state history since the income tax was instituted by cutting the marginal tax rates and again, this is not a tax cut for the 1% or the elites or the richest amongst our society. This is a tax cut that hardworking middle class families and will benefit from, and most importantly also addressing some of the issues with respect to taxation of retirement income. And so I know I'm sure we'll get into it, but by and large, when it came to our state finances, we're in a good position. We are spending within our means, but that means moving forward. When there will be greater pressures on certain areas of our budget, and it is important that in future years we also can continue to live within our means, but also ensure we're investing in key areas such as our infrastructure and in great schools. But yes, by and large, a successful budget year, and
I actually like Governor Lamont.
Yes.
And I think he's done a pretty good job of leadership. Does that influence how this all happens? I mean, he's the leader of the state, but is he getting there the nuts and bolts of the budget and pulling people together? Is that part of the reason it went well?
He is, and I would say, I've served in the legislature under 2 governors, Governor Lamont and previously Governor Malloy, and they had very much, stylistically different. I think, Lamont is more, he governs from a place of consensus, and I think it was very clear that he wanted to, to achieve a bipartisan budget, where both sides can at least come together on our state finances. I would say by and large, he's a fiscally responsible governor, and maybe more fiscally conservative than a lot of Democrats I even serve with in the legislature.
He's more conservative than me.
Very much so.
Sure.
He made it abundantly clear he wouldn't sign a budget that included any tax increases. So that kind of really set the stage for negotiations. questions. I serve on the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, so it was interesting, hearing the philosophical differences on state finances. You have many legislators who believe that we ought to raise taxes on in order to pay for certain services, and others believe that we ought not to. So you got to strike that balancing act. And I serve in the House Democratic Caucus. We are 98 strong, the largest caucus in state government. Almost a veto-proof majority. But within our caucus, we have a range of political perspectives, but also regional diversity. My district's more of a coastal suburban community, but we have everything from rural areas to urban cities, and so it's tough to find common ground, but we achieved it, and it's something to be proud of.
You mentioned Finance, Revenue, and Bonding. That's a very important committee. I'm sure that's
Yes.
probably affects a lot of different issues. And you're also on Planning and Development, which is near and dear to me, and then Environment. So you probably had things that in each of those areas that you wanted to accomplish. Did you do fairly well with that, or was it frustrating?
Yes, absolutely. I very much lucked out. I had a conversation at the beginning of the year with our Speaker of the House about which committees I wanted to serve on, and I gave him what I ultimately gave him, my top three. I was given in terms of my committee assignments. So as you mentioned, serve on Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, which has cognizance over the revenue side of the budget, setting tax policy for the state, and then also Planning and Development, cognizance over land use, zoning, municipal powers, essentially, and Environment Committee, cognizance over DEEP and Department of Agriculture and any animal statutes.
And I know from way back, environment was important to you. We've bonded
Yes.
because of that.
Yes.
And I told you should be a Democrat way back when you were
Yes.
promoting the environment on the other side of the aisle. But
Yes, of course.
thank
of
you
course.
for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say even now in retrospect, without question, my favorite committee to serve on. Just the breadth of issues that we're discussing, but also the urgency, by which we need to solve a lot of the critical challenges facing our future, with respect to climate change and the host of problems that that our community will directly face as a result of those. Of rising sea levels, for example, 20-inch sea level rise by 2050. What will that mean for our low-lying areas, our coastal communities, and folks who are older residents who are on fixed incomes, and what are we doing to ensure that their homes can withstand these, very powerful storms that will increase with greater frequency, as we're seeing, all across this world right now, and it's not just obviously. The storms, the hurricanes. We're seeing a host of, more frequent extreme weather events, and this is the new normal. And
it's affecting fisheries, it's affecting
Yes.
the bugs that we're getting around here, and
That's
the
right.
diseases that are spreading further north. It's
That's
a
right.
whole long list of items that are going to be bad news.
That's right.
and we need to really get serious about it.
That's right.
Much more serious.
So if it can swim, it can fly. It's coming before the Environment Committee. So fisheries-related issues. In Stonington, represent what they call the last remaining fishing fleet here in the state, and it has very robust. Seafaring community. It's a very robust seafaring community, and unfortunately, a lot of our fisheries are under threat because of obviously the rising sea temperature, and that's creating just a lot of uncertainty, not just in the region, but also the biodiversity degradation, and a host of other issues, as I mentioned earlier. But just some of the laws we worked on, I'm happy to provide a list here. We banned the we banned the hand harvesting of horseshoe crabs. Now they can only be harvested for medical purposes or for research, which is great. Obviously, a vulnerable species, very important to our coastal ecosystem. We're protecting migratory birds by requiring the state to turn off any publicly state-owned or leased building at night. Absolutely. So, obviously many bird species do, travel in the night sky.
Is important.
It is.
Dark sky.
Absolutely. And it's good for humans too. I should know.
Absolutely.
And also establishing a shorebird and seabird protection program. For example, the piping plover, they have quite a few nesting sites along Bushy Point and Bluff Point, and unfortunately, some folks and dogs, for example, can tamper in their nesting grounds. So
they're on the ground, so
exactly,
they're vulnerable.
Exactly. So it gives more authority to NCON to enforce, laws to protect their species when they're obviously nesting here, which is great. Every species, especially the species that have been here long before us, they should have a fighting chance at survival. And unfortunately, in my lifetime, your lifetime, we're seeing just a massive loss in species. And we can do better than that. We have a host of species that were once on the endangered species list that have been taken off that list because of conservation efforts. So we can all work together. Industry, recreational boating, people who love to recreate in Bluff Point, conservationists can all work together to help these species because we can enjoy the outdoors, of course, and we should. Coastal public access is so important, but we should be respectful of the nature as well.
Absolutely.
So those are the things in the Environment Committee. Correct me if I'm wrong, did you ask if there were some areas that we maybe fell short on?
Yeah, is there anything you didn't accomplish that you would hope to?
Yes, absolutely. So,
and will you pursue it next session?
Absolutely. So starting with, I think just in terms of state finances, two key areas. We did address what we call the retirement cliff in Connecticut. Under current law, benefits are exempt for single filers whose overall adjusted income is below $75,000, and for couples who are below $700,000. So essentially, if you are making as a couple $100,001, you're not receiving any of the exemption or the benefit from the exemption that the state put in place for reducing your retirement income tax liability. So that's really important if we want to keep retirees here. And obviously, some folks may be tempted to go to other states. But in my opinion, for folks who have worked here and or who have made an honest living and earning a modest pension as well, I would not consider a couple, whose retirement income is at $100,000 to be considered very affluent. They're a hardworking middle-class family. So now we've changed it so that the budget reduces the exemption for single filers between $75,000 and $100,000, and couples earning between $100,000 and $150,000. So you will be able to receive some of that benefit up to $150,000 for the exemption that's in place. So that's really important for this district does have a lot of retirees, and it is important that obviously folks can, especially with inflation and cost of living increases, have the ability to recoup some of their tax income. So, but that's an area I'd like the threshold to expand a little bit, so that way folks can enjoy that benefit a little bit more. And then lastly, on the planning and development front, where we fell short was with respect to short-term rentals. which is I'm house hunting now, and I'll tell you, obviously the issues right now with rising interest rates and also a low inventory is really creating, I think, a lot of issues for our area when we have a surplus of job opportunities, because of the growth at Electric Boat and its supply chain, of course, and a host of other, there are a lot of openings since the pandemic in a lot of sectors in our economy. There is not enough housing available for families here in southeastern Connecticut.
And I feel like there are investors buying up properties as investments, not to live in.
Yes.
And that's not right.
It isn't right, especially if
jacking up prices and eliminating housing.
That's
at the same
right.
time.
That's right.
And bringing in more tourists.
That's right. Especially if homes are in the, or they're zoned to be homes, right, in residential neighborhoods. And so that it is a cause of concern, and more so the proliferation of them. They just seem to be expanding. And this is an issue that it encompasses really every single neighborhood in my district, from Weequahic Cove all the way to the city of Groton, and certainly in Mystic.
My neighborhood has houses that only have cars in the weekend.
Yes.
If people come from New York or wherever, and then they go away.
So one thing I'd like to take a look.
Leaves a gap in the neighborhood.
It does, Peter. Absolutely, absolutely, and
doesn't matter how nice they are or what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's still not the same when they're not there all week.
Exactly. And I'm agnostic, and perhaps there is a place for them, and certainly I think there's a lot of nuance to the issue too, especially if you live within the home and it's a multifamily home and
there's some big houses
right.
that could be
exactly
shared.
Exactly.
And that
Without
would be
question.
fine.
And that's
with,
all right.
With a little bit of regulation, a little bit of oversight.
But I think it is an issue if in many cases you have folks buying up homes that they may never even set foot in, right? And then it's they're really a corporate entity that is operating it as a commercial, commercial property nonetheless. So
you were not successful on that issue?
We were not. So there was the bill as it was written would have created or allowed municipalities to levy a tax on short-term rentals, and also allow municipalities to create ordinances or policy or regulations to combat or deal with short-term rentals, and allowing them to work with consultants to do that. And so, but nonetheless, I would like, I will be putting forward a bill that would create a registration system. They have it in Rhode Island, and actually in Massachusetts, short-term rental operators have to register their short-term rental with the Department of Revenue Services. And if they're being used as a commercial entity, right, then that would be a mechanism by which municipalities could generate revenue source to pay for the
possible impacts.
The possible impacts and the regulation of it, right, of short-term rentals. So if you're going to have it, it should be obviously regulated, but municipalities shouldn't also be fearful of drafting regulations and, told that their laws are not, they don't have the legal authority to, create greater regulation for short-term rentals. So it's a very complex, nuanced issue, but we got to get to the drawing board.
We could do a whole program on
yes,
this issue
absolutely.
alone with a couple other people. It could go on for hours.
Yes, indeed.
But we should move on to other issues that you
absolutely
did or didn't accomplish.
Yes. So I would say that's really kind of the focus moving forward. Also, another win was dealing with us. With solid waste. Would like to. I think it's so important that we focus on waste diversion in the future, especially organic waste diversion, taking what could be composted, so food scraps, and removing those that solid waste from diverting that waste into to say an anaerobic or aerobic digester, so it can naturally compost.
Or a pig farm.
Or a pig farm, right?
Which
exactly.
could be a solution to some of the food waste that's out there.
Exactly.
And a help for farmers.
That's right. They say 30% of our solid waste stream is organics alone.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to
My
deal with
brother
the
has
waste.
chickens, and
does he?
a lot of food waste goes right to chickens.
Oh, I bet.
So that's a plus.
Yes. So that's another area I think what we need to continue working on
solid
as well.
waste is
So,
piling up
yes,
every day.
absolutely.
So it sounds like overall it was a pretty good session, and you had some wins and we had some consensus, so that seems like a plus.
Yes.
A tax cut. There are a couple issues that we're concerned about, and I'm sure you are too, because these are not they're not coming out of nowhere. But you know, we're definitely concerned about what's happening at the State Pier, the changes in New London for the wind generator staging operation. Just wondering what you're thinking about that, because there's definitely some problems have been coming out. The millions invested by the state. You know, things that were happening at State Pier are not anymore, like the road salt for the region is not there, so they're going to have to get it from further away, which is more expensive for the region. Containers and other cargo that used to come into London now has been shifted to New Haven. And I know you weren't there when a lot of these decisions were made, but I think we need to start being careful here, because Eversource sounds like they're dropping out, and Ørsted, the main developer, sounds like they may back away if they don't get some more benefits. So what do you think about this? It's looking pretty bad, in my opinion.
Yes, as you mentioned, I did.
And I am definitely in favor of wind, offshore wind. I think it's a great resource, and it could help our regions significantly, as the governor has said.
Yes, yes. So just for some context, so Ørsted is a Danish-owned, investor-owned utility, and you know they are the developer for the proposed wind farm, several wind farms that will be built along the East Coast here. You know, the state right now is on the hook for about $300 million in renovations to State Pier, and obviously that cost has escalated in the last few years, as well as the timeline by which the project would be completed. So there obviously have been issues in terms of the management of the property, and you know, these issues will certainly not go away, because as the state is continuing to make an effort or make a push to decarbonize our grid, you know, utilize a greater share of renewables as part of our, you know, our energy strategy and portfolio. You know, the transition, it will not happen overnight. It's going to take time, and certainly there's going to be some hiccups along the way. But I would say right now there's definitely an issue in terms of the governance of not just the Port Authority, but obviously, you know, the state's also issues with the state's commitments that we've made with both Eversource and Ørsted. So that we definitely.
Does any of it come into your committees, or is it?
No,
it's not,
no.
So
a lot of it is driven at the agency level, and certainly, you know, at the you know, the Loma administration and DEEP, and you know, and certainly the siting of these facilities won't happen in the state of Connecticut. They're happening offshore, so it's very much the policies are largely driven by what happens in Washington. So
Ørsted wants more tax breaks.
That's right. I think they're asking for an increase of their tax credit from 30% to 40%, and not sure.
And maybe not use American-made products in the process. So
absolutely,
it's going to be an argument, I'm sure. But
yes,
probably Biden is going to have to be involved with that.
That's right. That's right. But I would argue.
But I hope the legislature stays on top of it, because it's
absolutely. We don't have a choice, because again of the commitments we've made in terms of our power purchase, our procurements, and you know, power purchase agreements. So. You know, I will be touring the facility soon. I actually haven't as of yet, and you know, I think it's very important that every legislator understands and kind of follows the day-to-day minutia of what is happening with respect to the project.
Thank you. We're getting down to the last 5 minutes here, so this will be quick. But The other issue that we're a little concerned about, we have a long list, but we
Yeah.
picked these. The whole approach to electric vehicles as a solution for basically global warming, we feel pretty strongly that global warming has to be addressed as soon as possible, and that is one of the possible solutions. But it seems like there are a lot of ramifications for the electric vehicle push, and I'm wondering if you've thought much about that, if the legislature's looking at that. I mean, it's going to be expensive to set up the charging stations. The cars are not cheap, so people are going to have to be thinking
No.
about buying electric cars.
No.
And, I'm concerned a little bit about, the need for more electricity and
Yeah.
going to nuclear. And I definitely would oppose that.
Yeah.
It's not a clean source
Yeah.
in the long term.
Actually, I think this issue and maybe the previous question goes hand in hand, and
They're all related.
they are all related. And I think in some ways an answer can be driven by two efforts from some of our surrounding states. One in Maine, there's an effort or a referendum underway that would allow that would change currently they have two privately operate investor-owned utilities in Maine, and they have a referendum or a ballot initiative to create a new power authority that would essentially take over the two investor-owned utilities, akin to what you would have in Groton, like Groton Utilities or Norwich Public Utilities, a publicly owned utility, electric utility. They're looking to do that in Maine, and then in New York, they've now allowed the New York Power Authority to generate renewable power sources. And I think part of the problem is that Eversource historically has been driven by profits as opposed to, doing the right thing, right? So we're not. I think in order to have a transition, the true transition, we need to have more, kind of break the monopolistic structure of investor-owned utilities, and create more choice in the marketplace. So I think that would solve a lot of the issues, because the private sector is not going to be motivated to do it on their own. They're going to, they're going to ask for incentives.
Especially since the biggest source in the short term is conservation and
exactly
and getting more energy for our buck, basically.
Yes.
We're going to have to wrap this up. We wanted to say that we appreciate your email. It comes out regularly. It tells what you're up to.
Yes.
I want to urge everybody that's watching to get in touch with Aundré, and I think we're going to have it on the screen. If you get in touch with Aundré, you can get his email, which I think is every week, right?
Yes.
And it tells what you're up to, which is good, and also tells other things that are happening in the region. You have a really good calendar there for events that are happening, and I found a lot of things happening that are pretty interesting, and you attend a lot of them. So that's great, and I appreciate you doing that, because it's a real service, I think. But the best way to get a hold of you is by email, is that true?
That's correct. That's correct.
Or else bumping into you somewhere. I know you're at the Diddy Bag once a month, right?
Yes, standing coffee hours once a month, the first Saturday of the month, of course.
Okay. Well, anything quick you'd like to say at the end here? In a minute? I'm seeing we got a minute left.
No, I know we've gotten into, we didn't get into trains a little bit. Shoreline East, they have a new train schedule, but
I know, I was reading about that. It's great.
We'll have to come back, talk
Keep pushing
Shoreline
it,
East
keep pushing
extension to Mystic, and all the way to the westerly
Yeah.
border. It's so important.
Yeah.
But
it definitely rates right up there with electric vehicles. I think
That's
mass
right.
transit is a huge
Absolutely.
boon for our region, and I'm glad that the state is looking into that. I know there's a hearing coming up.
There
in
is.
Groton.
That's on September 19th. So
Good.
hope you can make it.
Thank you, Aundré.
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
And appreciate you being our representative. You're definitely a hardworking and accessible rep, which is important. Thank you, viewers, for watching us and for being involved in our democracy. A big shout out to SEC TV staff, who makes all this possible, and our great director and producer and wife and whip snapper, Terri Roper. I'm Peter Roper, serving up more potluck politics. Be active and be well.